Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speaking. I know, Raoul, I've had many conversations about just transition and green curriculums, which we'll get on to. I wanted, before going into the sort of the green side of it, is to talk a little bit about the regulatory background. I think we can't look to the future until we look at what's happened as well over the last couple of years and continues to happen with the COVID-19 pandemic and, of course, now the Ukraine crisis in the Black Sea. Then we'll move on to future fuels and decarbonisation and the just transition. I think seafarers have had an incredibly difficult 2 years and they need support as industry moves towards decarbonisation. I think for many of us now recognise that crew mental health is one of the top issues for reputable companies and organisations to address. But one of the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic has been the number of seafarers actually leaving the sector, something which we need to be cognizant on as we move towards a green future. And we're also now faced with the further challenges of the Black Sea and the war in Ukraine has had the impact on seafarers, not just those caught up directly in the conflict, but also on the wider supply chain. We have huge potential future skills gaps, and how can we encourage young people to enter and to join our industry going forward? Because we will still need shipping for the foreseeable future. And as we power towards the green transition, we must make sure seafarers are set up for success and for a just transition to this new decarbonised future. So just a little reminder on the regulatory background that covers our seafarers at the moment. We, of course, have the International ILO Maritime Labour Convention 2006 as amended, and there were some conversations a couple of weeks back and some amendments to the MLC are going to be coming into force. And for the women in the audience, now for the first time it's enshrined that women will be able to have PPE actually designed for women. So it's only taken 2,000 years to get that, but certainly it's a sort of step forward. And the MLC is split into 5 areas: minimum requirements for seafarers to work, conditions of employment, accommodation, health protection and compliance. And of course, back in that is the regulatory environment under the IMO, including STCW and all the MARPOL and SOLAS conventions as well, which again, seafarers will have to navigate their way through. So let's talk a little bit about COVID-19, because it is important as we learn from the mistakes of the pandemic as an industry and make sure we enact those solutions for the future. Because if you remember, at one point, 400,000 seafarers were stranded across the world, with some forced to remain on board their ships for up to 2 years. And that's hardly an advertisement for wanting to have a life at sea and to want to be part of our new bright future. Still, many issues still remain, despite, I suppose, we can all see perhaps the back of the pandemic here, but in China, with Chinese ports shut, we're still seeing the effects of it. And ICS, along with others, have continued to provide up-to-date medical guidance and roadmaps and encouraging vaccinations. I think we're up to about 86% of our seafarer workforce now vaccinated. But we've seen disproportionate quarantine and travel restrictions. We've seen in certain areas that seafarers have been denied access to medical facilities. We had one case of a ship's captain who sadly died on board the ship. It took us 6 months to be able to persuade a country to repatriate that body. These are hardly advertisements for wanting to move to our new future. So I put this because it's important as we focus on the things going forward. And this is going to have a real impact on the potential for young people to want to join our industry. But on the plus side of it, I've never seen our industry come together like ever before. The collaboration we've learned over the last 2 years has been incredible, from across shipping companies, ship management companies, the international organisations, in order to look after, protect and fight for our seafarers. And those are really positives which we can then take and move forward as we move to the just transition and a new decarbonised future. We've made sure we've lobbied and been successful in the end about getting access to shore leave for seafarers. We've lobbied government successfully to give key worker status. We've worked well with so many different agencies to make sure that seafarers are at the heart of what we do. So let's not lose those lessons, those learnings we've taken from the last 2 years to move forward as we move to the future. It's taught us about the importance of resilience. It's taught about working and well-being of our seafarers. And this is all really, really important. I think we perhaps lost sight of what the single most important factor of operating a ship, which is the people who man those ships. And that must be a really good thing. But also turning to the Ukraine crisis, when that kicked off on the 24th of February, we had at one point over 2,000 seafarers stranded in Ukrainian ports on over 100 ships. We've had seafarers who've been sadly killed and ships hit by munitions as a result of that. I'm pleased to say that due to actually some of the learnings in the COVID coming together and working with agencies, we've reduced the number of seafarers down to about 450 at the last count. But of course, with nearly 15% of the global workforce made up of Ukrainian and Russian seafarers, that's having long impacts on the supply chain and also in terms of manning our ships. We argued quite early on about the establishment of a maritime corridor. Those discussions are still ongoing, and I think it'll be some time before any sort of safe humanitarian corridor is put in place. We have looked at and supported the families of Ukrainian seafarers. Many ship management companies and shipping companies have done just that. We've also looked at how do we pay seafarers, for example, with all the sanction on Russian seafarers, how do we actually make sure that they're non-combatants, they're not part of this, their innocence really caught up in all of this, and we've been working very hard to ensure their welfare. And the reason why I put this in context, because these lessons, again, we need to take when we move forward. So looking at the new fuels, it's something we in the ICS are calling the fourth propulsion revolution. We've had from sail to steam to oil and now to this new future. And shipping is going to be key to that journey to net zero, not just for decarbonising itself, but also transporting the new fuels. We've actually launched last week a new report, Fueling the Fourth Propulsion Revolution, which shows that innovation and opportunity is going to go hand in hand. And our report found that to reach the industry's 2050 net zero goal target, shipping's fuel needs would require electricity from renewable sources to increase by 3,000 terawatt hours. This is the equivalent of the entire world's current renewable energy production. And that's just for shipping, which makes up 3%. So you can see the challenge which faces us. But also, where those fuels, our sustainable fuels, are going to be produced, are going to be far from the markets which need them. So we're going to need shipping to be able to transport those fuels to those places. So this presents a massive opportunity for our industry, massive opportunity to our sector, but we need the seafarers to be able to man those ships. So, if you think where the likely places like Chile, to get the fuels, the many more ships we're going to actually need, it's going to provide something for us to all think about and the technology that goes with it. But we're going to need those seafarers to man those ships, and we're going to need to get over some of the hurdles we've encountered over the last few years to persuade young people this really is a future worth pursuing. So we'll talk a little bit about decarbonisation and the just transition. In recognition of some of the lessons we learned over the last 2 years, I've been working very closely with the International Transport Workers Federation and formed a really good relationship with their General Secretary, Steve Cotton. And we said we can't lose sight of what we've learned now. How can we make sure going forward we learn from that and capitalise on that, and we have a true partnership between the employers and the workforce going forward? So along with the UN Global Compact and the ITF, ICS, and also with the support of the IMO and the International Labour Organization, we set up the Just Transition Task Force, and I know Ocean Technologies are a part of that, with them bringing together businesses, bringing together these agencies to actually plan for the future and to make sure that the green curriculum, which I know is being looked at the moment, is there waiting for our seafarers. And we make sure that everyone shares in the benefits of decarbonisation from the global south to the global north. We need to make sure that seafarers are upskilled. We need to make sure that skill development is inclusive. We need to, today, for the first time, I was on a panel where there was more women than men, and we weren't talking about a diversity or equality issue. We were talking about quite a deeply technical issue. That's got to be a first. So we've got to make sure we got to this transition. We don't miss out on 50% of the global population, and we make sure it's an attractive and inclusive place for all. We need to ensure there's decent work, that we have the gender and diversity, that we have look forward to the health and safety of our seafarers, and ensure that there's a good, strong social dialogue moving forward. And we make sure that we have decent work for our workforce so we can make that transition and actually show leadership to the world. I'm always very proud of our sector. We are the only global industry which has a minimum wage. No other global industry has that. It seems bizarre, doesn't it? We're the only global industry which has a minimum rights of work through the Maritime Labour Convention. we, I believe, can show true leadership by building on this as we move to a zero carbon future to make sure we have an inclusive, highly skilled, highly motivated workforce going forward. So I'll leave it on that. But really, it's a massive opportunity for us in going forward as we get to 2050 and hopefully many zero carbon fuel ships on the water then with all the technology that entails. So thank you very much for listening.